But every owner takes a gamble when they say, I'm going to go with mass timber because it's going to take me 6 months to a year to design the building. And then you have another year of construction. What happens to your mass timber pricing in those 2 years? People often ask me, how can European price be better here in the US than US product? In Europe, okay, we can easily say, we can look historically, and we can easily say the cost of mass timber has gone up about 3% per year, right? Because we don't run the risk that 18 months from now, that market is gonna be doing crazy things like that. Now, we don't have those fluctuations in lumber. Well, that's one of the reasons why. Not every CLT manufacturer can do that, because there's certain things that need to be in place that we have that others may not.
And the lumber and the mass timber markets work a little different in Europe compared to America. Can you touch a little bit on those differences in the lumber market between the two?
Number one, most straightforward difference is lumber in Europe is not a commodity product. It's not, right? In the US, we trade lumber as commodity. And then every day, okay? It's got its advantages, but there are also disadvantages to it. It's a much more volatile market, okay? It is, we're here in the US, and you guys know this better than I do, right? We can see great fluctuations on price from one day to the next, okay? We don't see that in Europe. Okay, now we do live in a global market, right? Cost of lumber in Europe on average over the years, and then you see the US, you see the correlation. If it goes up in the US, it does go up in Europe. It's normally about 2-3 months behind, and it's not a line that you can graph. One day it's here, next day it's here, next day it's there. It's a much smoother line all throughout. The highs, the lows, everything. It's because it's not a commodity. When it comes to that, it is, and how does that affect mass timber, right? Well, first thing is, one of the issues with mass timber in the construction world is you have to make the decision that you're going to go with mass timber building very early on, right? But every owner takes a gamble when they say, I'm going to go with mass timber, right? Because it's going to take me 6 months to a year to design the building, right? If I have a design team that they already know how to work with mass timber. But that's what it takes to design a building. That's what it takes a building from program all the way to construction to permit before you even break ground, right? And then you have another year of construction or 2 years of construction, depending on how big your project is. Well, what happens to your mass timber pricing in those 2 years before you actually buy the mass timber, right? So it is, as an industry, the US has ways that has coped with that. And I cannot speak for every manufacturer here. I can speak for what I know in the industry is, always somebody has to take a gamble. I can guarantee my pricing, a year from now, but that's going to come with what it is right now with a 25% increase, right? Because I cannot sell millions of a product that I don't know what it's going to cost, a year from now. Right, because we don't know how that market is going to behave in the US. In Europe, okay, we can easily say, we can look historically, and we can easily say the cost of mass timber has gone up about 3% per year, but it remains very, very stable, right? So people often ask me, is like, how can your price, be better sometimes here in the US? How can a European price be better here in the US than US product? Well, that's one of the reasons why. Right? We don't have those fluctuations in lumber. One of the things that we can do internally is we can say, look, we know your project is just in a schematic design now, and you're going to have this much volume of wood in your project. We can guarantee you that 18 months from now, you're going to pay this amount based on today's prices, right? Because we don't run the risk that 18 months from now, that market is going to be doing crazy things like that. Now, not every CLT manufacturer can do that because there's certain things that need to be in place that we have that others may not. The seedlings, the forestry management, the harvesting, when everything is vertically integrated, we know since very early on, 2 years in advance, what we're going to be looking at in 2 years, right? So in a lot of the European market is set up that way, right? We have some mass timber suppliers in the US that have a very similar business model. I don't think to the scale that Binderholz does, Okay, but that is definitely the right way. If you ask me to have a business model, there are other ways I do, but that's how you cope, with difficulties in a commodity market.
So you have that kind of vertically integrated system that lets you tamper down the volatility into the fiber that goes into the mass timber, which then stabilizes price and lets developer owners kind of count on that moving forward. Are there any other differences between sourcing mass timber from Europe versus US, maybe in terms of the panel types, the thicknesses, the architectural quality, anything like that?
Yes, there are, right? And again, this is nothing negative. We have phenomenal products in the US. We have phenomenal steps here in the US. The US industry is going to a point, to this really, beginning to understand mass timber, right? One of the things that happens, one of the reasons Binder never really started off with a mass timber facility here is it is your end product is going to reflect, okay, the raw fiber that went into your end product, right? So one of the things that the binders, quality is important. I mean, quality, you'll see the quality, the consistency of European CLT across the board, okay? And consistency is key here, right? It is from one year to the next, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. They have a consistency and a look that is being established, right? And so what happens is when you have control of the raw fiber that you're using in your product, you are much better equipped to guarantee the quality of your product, right? I cannot guarantee the quality of a product in which I don't know what kind of lumber I'm getting into my product, or it varies from week to week, right? And I think the mass timber industry is beginning to understand this, but it was a necessary step that the US had to take. You need to have a manufacturing facility, okay, and educate the sawmills. Okay, because the lumber that we use in CLT is not the same lumber that we cut on an everyday. It's not the same lumber that we kill drying every day, right? There are certain things. Same for glulam. We know this for glulam, and it took the U.S. industry many years when glulam was first introduced, okay, to be able to, okay, how do we come up with ways that we can categorize the glulam, that we can grade the lumber that we need for the glulam, and how do we get consistency in the product, right? But that wasn't something that happened overnight. That is something that took decades to develop, right? I do believe we are now in the first decade of CLT development on that stage, right? So that is a great timeline for the US industry. Now, we have the advantage in the US that we have a lot of knowledge from Europe. Those guys spent the hard time of figuring it out, how to do it, So when we took over, okay, we already had 20% of it done. We just got to worry about the 80%. So it is never going to be, a linear follow each other. It's going to catch up, and the US is going to catch up to a certain point. But then after that point, then it's going to begin to run parallel, right? We are great inventors in the US. Okay, we always have been. So we will find ways to get there. Hence, one of the reasons that Binder is looking to have a manufacturing facility here in the US, right? It just goes with that progress. It just goes with that growth of the industry.